But I must confess, it feels good to be thought of as a person, not as a personality. I don't read all the things written about me. I wasn't aware that the world thought I was so weird and bizarre. But when you grow up, as I did, in front of 100 million people since the age of 5.
All over the world, America's the only one because, I don't want to say too much.
But it's not number one in the United States.
It's conspiracy, yeah. I don't want to say too much. I'm done.
This is the situation. I have a skin disorder that destroys the pigmentation of the skin. It's something that I cannot help, okay? But when people make up stories that I don't want to be who I am, it hurts me.
When people try to explain Michael Jackson, they usually reach for big labels: genius, icon, victim, mystery. But those words don't really explain how he moved through the world on a daily level. They don't explain why certain things drained him so fast, why other things seemed to calm him instantly, why he could command a stadium and then disappear for days, why he trusted some people deeply and shut others out without warning. There is one quiet trait that runs through all of it, and once you see it, his life stops looking random. Michael Jackson felt boundaries very strongly. Physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, social boundaries. He felt where people ended and where he began more intensely than most. And the problem was that the world never respected those lines. This started before he had language for it. When Michael was a child, attention wasn't something that came and went. It was permanent. Crowds existed before he understood why they were there. Adults touched him, moved him, posed him, praised him, corrected him without asking. Cameras were pointed at him before he understood what a camera meant. He didn't learn that attention could be turned off. He learned that it arrived and stayed. That's a very different lesson than most children learn. Most people grow up discovering their personal space slowly. They learn when closeness feels good and when it feels like too much. Michael never got that learning phase. His body and his presence became public property very early. And once that happens, the nervous system adapts in ways that are hard to undo. Think about how a normal child learns space. You pull away when you're uncomfortable. Someone notices. They stop. Over time, you learn where your edges are. Michael didn't get that feedback loop. Crowds screamed no matter what he felt. Adults pushed forward no matter what he needed. That teaches you something very specific, that your signals don't change the environment. So later in life, you stop using signals. You start using structures. As he grew older, this sensitivity didn't disappear. It became sharper. By the time he was a teenager, Michael already preferred quiet rooms. He liked being indoors. He liked places where sound was controlled. He liked routines. Predictability mattered to him. People often called this shyness, but that word doesn't hold up if you watch how he worked. In rehearsals, he was direct. He corrected dancers openly. He stopped music when something felt wrong. In the studio, he led rooms full of professionals, many of them older than him. On stage, he could hold tens of thousands of people in silence with a single pause. That's not fear. That's someone who understands space deeply. Michael didn't dislike people. He disliked being flooded by them. There's a difference that gets missed all the time. He liked connection when it was calm, when it was chosen, when it was mutual. He struggled when connection was forced. Fame made forced connection constant. Fame removes distance. Strangers feel allowed to touch you, to follow you, to comment on your body, your face, your life. Michael once described crowds as hands everywhere. That wasn't poetry, that was literal. That was how his body experienced it. When people screamed, the first thing he felt wasn't joy, it was pressure. That pressure showed up physically. He fainted. He needed oxygen. He needed dark rooms and silence after appearances. Bodyguards weren't just about danger. They were buffers. They created space where his nervous system could calm down. This helps explain something people often misunderstand about his need for control. The planning, the rehearsals, the precision. His concerts were timed carefully. Transitions were fixed. Movements were practiced again and again. People often describe this as obsession or ego, But think about what control does for someone like him. When things are planned, surprises are fewer. When surprises are fewer, stress stays lower. Precision reduces chaos. Structure makes the outside world predictable. For Michael, control wasn't about dominance. It was about survival. It was a way to make overwhelming environments tolerable. You see this same pattern in how he chose relationships. One of the most misunderstood parts of his life is how relaxed he often seemed around children. People react emotionally to that and stop thinking. They don't ask why that felt different to him. Children don't push social rules. They don't play status games. They don't expect performance. They don't project complex stories onto you. They say what they feel. They leave when they're tired. They don't demand explanations. Adults are different. Adults bring expectations. They judge. They project. They negotiate power. For someone who feels boundaries strongly, that difference is huge. Children felt predictable. Adults often felt invasive. That doesn't mean Michael wanted to be a child. His life shows the opposite. He negotiated massive contracts. He understood ownership. He ran complex productions. He made long-term plans. What he chose carefully was where to spend emotional energy. Another thing people noticed was how much he explained himself. In interviews, he repeated ideas. He clarified intentions. He spoke carefully about how he felt and what he meant. Some people saw this as insecurity, but look at the pattern across time. He hated being misunderstood. To him, misunderstanding felt like someone stepping into his inner space and rearranging things without permission. When the media told stories about him that weren't true, it didn't feel like criticism. It felt invasive. So he tried to correct it, again and again. Sometimes too much. Sometimes in ways that backfired. But the impulse stayed the same. He wanted his inner world to remain his. When explaining didn't work, he withdrew. This is where Neverland fits in. People laughed at it. The rides, the animals, the scale. But Neverland wasn't built to impress anyone. It was built to manage access. For the first time, Michael could decide who entered his space.
The parties involved were still not satisfied and wanted to take even more pictures. It was a nightmare, a horrifying nightmare. But if this is what I have to endure to prove my innocence, my complete innocence, so be it.
No crowds outside windows, no random cameras, no strangers reaching for him. It was a place where the world slowed down enough for him to breathe. That same logic explains why he covered his children's faces in public. It wasn't about hiding them forever. It was about delay, giving them time, giving them something he never had, a period of being unknown. This boundary sensitivity shows up even in his music. His songs have space, clear rhythm, clear structure. Silence matters. Nothing bleeds endlessly. Every sound knows where it belongs. That kind of music doesn't come from chaos. It comes from someone who needs order inside noise. When his life felt more chaotic, the music turned inward. Songs like Stranger in Moscow feel alone even when they're full. That sound comes from being surrounded by people and still feeling unreachable. People who met him away from cameras often describe someone warm, funny, attentive, gentle. That wasn't an act. That was Michael without pressure. Public Michael and private Michael weren't two different people. They were the same person under different levels of stress. When stress rose, distance appeared. When stress dropped, warmth came out. As the years went on, the pressure didn't ease. Media attention grew. Stories spread faster. Trust became harder. Michael narrowed his circle more and more. This is often described as paranoia or isolation. But seen through the boundary lens, it looks different. He wasn't pulling away because he disliked people. He was pulling away because he felt too much of them. His system was overloaded. Retreat became the only way to stay functional. Think about how rare his situation was. There was no example for that level of fame, no guide, no warning. He became known everywhere before anyone understood what that would do to a human being. He learned through trial and error, mostly error. And once the world decided who he was, changing that story became almost impossible. Every attempt to speak was filtered through noise. This is why his story still feels unresolved. It isn't really about guilt or innocence. It's about what happens when a person never gets to control the distance between themselves and the world. Michael spent his life trying to build boundaries that most people are given naturally. He was trying to learn, as an adult, something most children learn slowly and safely. Where the world ends, where the self begins. That work never really stopped, and the world never really helped. When people call him strange, they're often describing coping. When they call him distant, they're describing protection. When they call him fragile, they're seeing exhaustion. Once you understand this trait, his life stops feeling chaotic. It feels painfully consistent. A child with no protected space, an adult trying to draw lines later than most, a world that kept crossing them anyway. Michael Jackson wasn't misunderstood because people lacked information. He was misunderstood because they didn't know what to look for. His story isn't about escaping reality, it's about surviving attention. And that's what makes it uncomfortable, because it means the same thing that made him famous is also the thing that hurt him the most.